16. Oldest Black R&B legends who are still alive today. What if I told you some of the greatest Black R&B legends in history are still alive right now? And most people have already started treating them like ghosts. These are the voices that shaped America, shook churches, filled arenas, and gave heartbreak. Its soundtrack, yet too many are no longer spoken of with the respect they earned. Stay with us, because the names in this video are not just survivors of music history, they are music history. Subscribe now to Black Legends Revealed before this journey begins. Carla Thomas. Carla Thomas was born in Memphis in 1942 and stepped into soul music early enough to stand at the front edge of Stax before the label had fully become Stax in the public imagination. She recorded "'Cause I Love You" with her father, Rufus Thomas, when she was still in high school, and that regional hit helped push satellite records toward the sound that would soon define a whole city. Then came Gee Whiz, Look at His Eyes, the record that carried her onto the national charts and made her one of the first great female voices tied to the label's rise. By the middle of the 1960s, she was no side note in somebody else's story. She had B.A.B.Y., she had albums of her own, and she had that duet with Otis Redding Tramp that still sounds like two strong personalities daring each other to blink first. The years after Stax's first golden run did not erase her. They simply moved her into a different place in the memory of the music. She remained tied to Memphis, to her father's legacy, and to the sound that helped turn Southern soul into something larger than a local movement. In 2021, she appeared on Valerie June's Call Me a Fool, a collaboration that went on to receive a Grammy nomination for Best American Roots Song, which meant Carla was still entering new recordings more than 60 years after her first breakthrough. How many singers can say they helped open the doors of Stax in one century, and were still showing up on Grammy-recognized work in the next? She is still here now, and the present tense matters. A 2025 Memphis Magazine feature put her back in focus as the queen of Memphis soul, and recent performance clips and event listings show her still appearing in live settings, including Take Me to the River-related performances and a scheduled New Orleans date in 2026. Carla Thomas is no museum piece sealed behind glass. She is one of the living voices that can still walk into a room and shorten the distance between now and the first years of Memphis soul. Swamp Dogg. Swamp Dogg was born Jerry Williams Jr. in Virginia in 1942, and he had already been recording for years before the world knew him by the name that made him impossible to confuse with anybody else. He cut his first record as a child, worked through the 1950s and 1960s under versions of his own name, then broke the whole frame open in 1970 with Total Destruction to Your Mind, a record that pushed soul satire, country feeling, and outright weirdness into the same room. He never really returned to normal after that, which is exactly why his catalog still feels alive. Even when the mainstream did not know where to place him, he kept writing, producing, and moving through music like a man who had no interest in asking permission. He did not freeze into cult status and disappear. In the last few years alone, he kept releasing work including Blackgrass from West Virginia to 125th Street, which his official channels promoted in 2024 and 2025 as a new album, and he kept showing up on stage too. His official tour page lists live dates into April 2026. Including a Norfolk appearance on April 18th, so he is not being remembered from a distance only. He is still walking into rooms and doing the job in real time. How many men in their 80s are still strange on purpose, still touring, still making records, and still refusing to sand down the edges that made them matter? Now there is another layer around his story because the world has started looking at him more closely while he is still here to answer back. The documentary Swamp Dogg Gets His Pool Painted premiered at SXSW in 2024 and reached U.S. theaters in May 2025, turning his Los Angeles home, his collaborators, and his late-life creative world into part of the public record. Recent interviews around the film described him at 82, still creating, still performing, still living communally with friends and fellow musicians, and still unwilling to become tidy for anybody else's comfort. Swamp Dogg is not surviving as a relic. he is still making a mess in the most useful way an artist can. Thelma Houston. Thelma Houston was born in Mississippi in 1946 and came into music through gospel before pop audiences ever attached her name to disco. She sang with the Art Reynolds Singers in the 1960s, signed with Capitol in 1967, and then released Sunshower in 1969, a solo debut written and produced by Jimmy Webb. Not long after Motown became the place where her name widened. When she recorded Don't Leave Me This Way, the song did more than become a hit. It put her at the top of the pop R&B and dance charts and made her the first solo female artist at Motown to win the Grammy for Best R&B Female Vocal Performance. That one record turned her into part of the permanent language of 1970s black popular music. But her story did not begin there, and it did not stop there. She kept recording after the Motown breakthrough, and the discography on her official site still traces that long run through albums like Breakwater Cat, Never Gonna Be Another One, Qualifying Heat, A Woman's Touch, and later singles, including I Still Love You. Her name also kept moving through television specials and tribute stages, from Motown's 60th Grammy celebration to later live programs built around the era she helped define. The official site still presents her not as a memory locked in one decade, but as a performer with a working show, a bookable band set, and a stage identity built around My Motown Memories and more. How many singers from her generation can say the song most people know is only one door into a career that still has live microphones waiting on the other side? She is still here now, and the present tense is easy to see. Her official tour page lists public performances in 2024 and 2025, including Pride, Toronto, Indianapolis Pride, and the 2025 Soul Train Cruise, while the current booking page remains active in 2026 with a full live show setup and current contact information. Thelma Houston is not sitting in history as a frozen name attached to one anthem. She is still being booked, still being introduced, and still carrying a voice that connects gospel roots, Motown polish, and dance floor survival in one body that never left the story. Maxine Brown. Maxine Brown was born in South Carolina in 1939, but the sound that made her impossible to forget was shaped in gospel first long before she reached the R&B charts. As a teenager, she sang with New York gospel groups. Then in 1960, she wrote and recorded All in My Mind, and that record moved fast enough to reach number 2 on the Billboard R&B chart and number 19 on the pop chart. A year later, Funny followed it into the R&B top 3. She was not coming in as a novelty voice or a one-night spark. She was arriving with phrasing that sounded intimate, wounded, and controlled all at once, the kind of singing that never had to push too hard to leave a mark. Then the road started turning. She moved from Nomar to ABC Paramount, then to Wand, and the Wand years brought some of her strongest records, including Oh No, Not My Baby, and the Chuck Jackson duet Something You Got. She kept cutting records, kept working, kept making songs that carried far more feeling than noise, but the industry moved the spotlight around faster than voices like hers were given room to settle. She was there in the middle of the great soul years, surrounded by changing labels, shifting priorities, and a business that always seemed ready to chase the next angle. How many singers from that era are still here? Still breathing, still able to remind us what real restraint sounded like before everybody started over singing the truth. Her commercial peak faded after the 1960s, but she did not vanish from the story. The Rhythm and Blues Foundation honored her with a Pioneer Award in 1991, and her career stretched for decades beyond the years most people mention first. Maxine Brown is still alive today, and that matters because voices like hers carry the texture of early soul in a way archives cannot. She is not just part of an old playlist. She is part of the living memory of the music itself. Gladys Knight. Gladys Knight was born in Atlanta in 1944 and started singing so early that by the time most children were still learning hymns, she was already winning talent contests. She rose with the Pips, carried that family group through the Motown years, and turned songs like I Heard It Through the Grapevine, Neither One of Us, and Midnight Train to Georgia into part of the emotional memory of Black American music. The voice always had weight in it, not because it was loud, but because it knew how to land on a line and make the line stay there. Decades passed. Labels changed, styles shifted, radio moved on and circled back, and her name never slipped out of the conversation for long. Britannica still places her among the most important American singers of the modern era, and her official site still carries her career in the present tense, not as a closed chapter. The years after the classic hits did not turn her into a memory piece. Honors kept arriving while she was still here to stand inside them. A 2025 local report on an upcoming concert noted her major distinctions, including the Kennedy Center honors the National Medal of Arts and the 2024 Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Her own pages were still telling fans she was back on tour, and her official show dates page remains active in 2026. Ticket listings and venue announcements also show live dates continuing into 2026, including a July 10th, 2026 performance in Cherokee, North Carolina, and an August 7th, 2026 date in Champaign. How many singers can say they have lived long enough to watch several generations claim their songs and still walk on stage as the same woman who made those songs matter in the first place? She is still here now, still moving through theaters and concert halls, still carrying a name that did not need reinvention to survive. The record stayed. The stage stayed. So did Gladys Knight. William Bell. William Bell was born in Memphis in 1939 and came into soul music before the genre had fully settled into history. He was one of the early artists signed to Stax, and his 1961 debut, You Don't Miss Your Water, helped give the young label one of its first defining records. That song did not need shouting speed or flashy drama. It moved with patience, regret, and the kind of plain-spoken ache that Southern soul would keep returning to for years. Bell was not standing outside that sound watching it form. He was inside the room while it was being built. Later, he would also write or co-write songs that kept traveling long after their first release, including I Forgot to Be Your Lover and Born Under a Bad Sign. Two titles that stretched his reach far beyond his own recordings. His story kept moving even when louder names often drew more immediate attention. During the Stax years, he recorded albums such as The Soul of a Bell Bound to Happen and Phases of Reality, and over time he became one of those artists whose importance grows clearer the longer you look at the foundations of the music. Then, decades after many people might have expected him to settle into legacy status alone, he returned with This Is Where I Live, released through the revived Stax label in 2016. The album won the Grammy for Best Americana Album in 2017, giving Bell one of the most striking late-career victories in modern soul. How many artists can say they helped shape the first great wave of Southern soul and were still winning major awards more than half a century later? He is still here. Now, still recording, still releasing music through his own Will Be label, and his official site has continued posting new material and live updates into 2026. In 2024, You Don't Miss Your Water was announced for induction into the Grammy Hall of Fame, sending his first great statement back into the center of the conversation. Mavis Staples. Mavis Staples was born in Chicago in 1939 and grew up inside a family sound that never stayed inside church walls for long. With the Staple Singers, she carried gospel into freedom songs, protest gatherings, and the wider American bloodstream singing material that moved through the civil rights era as more than performance. Her official biography still places her right there in that history. The Staple Singers opened for Martin Luther King Jr. at rallies, and Freedom Highway became part of the soundtrack of the 1965 Selma to Montgomery March. That history never left her voice, even after she stepped into solo work and kept building a catalog that reached far beyond the years when the family group first changed everything. She did not stop moving when most artists from her generation would already have been framed as heritage acts only. In recent years, she has kept recording and kept showing up in new places. Her official site still centers current work around her latest chapter, and in 2026 she is still booked on the road with dates listed in New Orleans, Durham, and the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. At the same time, she has continued appearing in wider musical conversations outside her own catalog. A 2026 Grammy interview about the Doobie Brothers' new album noted that Mavis Staples appears as a guest vocalist on Walk This Road, placing her inside a brand new release rather than a memory piece. How many voices from the civil rights era are still alive, still touring, and still being invited into new music because the authority in the singing never left? That is where Mavis stands now. Not behind glass, not reduced to archival footage, but still walking on stage in 2026 with the same life behind the sound that made people listen in the first place. The tour page on her official site is active right now, and the story on her own biography page still treats her present tense as something earned through a lifetime of work, not simply preserved by age. Otis Williams. Otis Williams was born in Texas in 1941, raised in Detroit, and built his life into one of the longest unbroken lines in American group music. Before the world knew the Temptations as legends, he was there in the years when the name was still being formed, when harmonies, discipline, choreography, and ambition were being welded together into something Motown could send across the country. He is the founding member who stayed. As the decades kept taking other voices away, he became the one man still standing inside the original promise, carrying songs like My Girl Get Ready and Just My Imagination, not as museum pieces, but as live material. He still has to walk out and deliver. The group's official history and bio still present him that way. Now founder-anchor, last surviving original member still on stage. That kind of survival is not passive. It asks for a man to keep showing up while the meaning of the group changes around him, while generations of audiences arrive knowing the songs before they know the history, while the names beside him on stage are no longer the names that first built the legend. In 2025 interviews, we're still introducing him as the last surviving original Temptation, and official and ticketed listings show the group continuing into 2026 with new tour dates, including spring dates and a Royal Albert Hall appearance with the Four Tops. How many men can say they did not just witness a chapter of music history, but kept walking inside it long enough to outlive nearly everyone who helped write the first pages? He also lived long enough to see the Temptation story become a book, a television event, a Broadway musical, and still not lose his place at the center of it. Official Temptations coverage continues to tie him to Ain't Too Proud and to the group's ongoing live identity, while recent pieces still describe him giving road life advice, talking football halftime performances, and preparing to do what he has been doing for most of his life: go out, sing, move, and keep the name alive. Otis Williams is still here, and the Temptations are still moving with him at the front. Bettye LaVette. Bettye LaVette came into the world in 1946 and reached the charts before most singers have even learned how to hold a stage. In 1962, still a teenager, she cut My Man, He's a Lovin' Man, and the record hit hard enough to announce a voice that already sounded seasoned, rough at the edges, in the best way, full of grain command and lived-in truth. The road after that never moved cleanly. Labels changed, momentum slipped, and the kind of singer she was did not always fit what the business wanted to sell at any given moment. But she kept going, and that long stretch of persistence became part of the legend too. Her own official biography still frames that first hit as the opening chapter of a career built more on endurance than convenience. Then the years that were supposed to push her into the background started doing the opposite. Records like Blackbirds and LaVette brought her name back into the center with the force of someone who had not softened and had not learned how to fake anything just to sound current. The Recording Academy lists LaVette as her 7th Grammy nomination, and even now that late chapter is still growing instead of closing. In late 2025, her official Facebook page announced that she had been invited to perform at Carnegie Hall in March 2026 for a Billy Joel tribute, proof that her name is still moving through major rooms and not just living in memory. How many singers can wait that long for the world to catch up and still sound like they never asked for permission in the first place? She is still here now, still being called back to the stage, still turning up in new musical conversations. Odessa built The Last Goodbye. Around her voice, and that old recording found a whole new life with a newer generation without losing any of the ache that made it matter the first time. Betty LaVette did not survive by becoming softer, safer, or easier to package. She stayed exactly the kind of singer she had been from the start, and time finally stopped acting like that was a problem. Patti LaBelle. Patti LaBelle was born in Philadelphia in 1944 and had already started building her name before most of the women who came after her had even entered the room. First came the Bluebells, then La Belle, then Lady Marmalade, the record that turned a daring group into a permanent part of American music history. After the group years came the solo run that made her even harder to contain. If Only You Knew, New Attitude, Stir It Up, and all the live performances that turned her into the kind of singer people did not just hear, but waited for. Britannica still places her among the defining American singers shaped by the Chitlin circuit. Broadway soul pop and R&B, and her own official site, still carries her name in the present tense. The years kept moving, and Patti kept finding ways to stay inside them. She did not disappear into old clips and anniversary tributes. Her official touring page is active right now, and public ticket listings show her still booked through 2026, with concerts including Morristown in April and Danville in June. Songkick also lists multiple upcoming 2026 dates, which means the voice that carried all those records is still being called to stages rather than simply remembered from afar. How many artists can spend 7 decades in music and still have people buying tickets because they want the woman herself, not just the memory of what she used to be? She is still here now, still moving through theaters, casinos, concert halls, and tribute stages with the same name that once shook television specials and arena crowds. Her official site says a newly revamped website is coming soon, but even in that transition, the message is simple: Patti LaBelle is still touring. The records lasted. The stage lasted. The woman lasted too, and in 2026, she is still stepping out under her own name while audiences keep showing up to meet it. Dionne Warwick. Dionne Warwick was born in New Jersey in 1940 and came out of gospel before she ever became the woman people would associate with elegance control and one of the most recognizable voices in American popular music. Her run with Burt Bacharach and Hal David turned songs like Don't Make Me Over, Walk On by I Say a Little Prayer, Alfie and Do You Know the Way to San Jose into something bigger than radio hits. They became part of the way America heard longing, sophistication, and adult heartbreak. Britannica notes that she remains one of the most charted female vocalists of the rock era, and her official site still presents her as a 6-time Grammy winner whose career has stretched across more than 6 decades. The long career did not stop moving once the classic singles became canon. In 2023, she was named a Kennedy Center honoree. In 2024, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the Musical Excellence category, and East Orange, New Jersey honored her with a street renaming ceremony, Dionne Warwick Way. Those are not the gestures people make for a memory that has gone quiet. They are the kind of recognition that keeps arriving when the figure at the center is still standing there to receive it. How many singers can say they lived long enough to watch the culture catch up to how large they always were? She is still here now, and the present tense is easy to see. Her official site has an active tour page. Her official Facebook promoted a 2025 stage show built around her story. And in March 2026, she was still giving interviews ahead of live appearances while talking about a new duets album, Duets. The 2026 interview from WOUB describes her discussing upcoming concerts and new music, rather than speaking only from the safe distance of retrospection. Dionne Warwick is not sealed inside the 1960s or 1970s. She is still moving through her own name in real time, carrying the same poise that made the name last this long. Candi Staton. Candi Staton was born in Alabama in 1940 and came up through gospel before the wider world ever heard her as a soul singer. As a girl, she sang with the Jewel Gospel Trio traveling the church circuit, while most future stars were still trying to find a first stage. Then the sound changed around her and she changed with it. By the end of the 1960s, she was cutting Southern soul at fame, turning songs like Stand By Your Man into records that carried both hurt and backbone, then pushing even further with Young Heart's Run Free, the 1976 hit that made her voice part of disco history too. Few careers from that era moved across gospel, soul, and dance music with that kind of ease and still kept the same woman at the center of it. Her story did not stop at the old hits. She kept recording, kept shifting, kept finding new rooms to sing in. In 2018, she released Unstoppable, her 30th album, and the title fit a woman who had already lived through enough turns to fill several careers. In late 2025, her official Facebook announced that she would perform at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum during its Muscle Shoals celebration. A reminder that her name still belongs in live musical spaces, not only in retrospectives. Around the same period, her public pages were still active, still speaking in the present tense, still treating her as an artist with movement left in the story. How many singers from her generation can say they lived long enough to become part of the history and still walk back onto the stage as one of the people who made it? She is still here now, and that matters for more than nostalgia. Candy Staton carries one of those voices that lets you hear several eras at once. Church, Muscle Shoals disco, comeback endurance. She is not frozen inside Young Heart's Run Free, even if that song will follow her forever. The woman behind it kept going, kept recording, kept showing up, and kept giving later years something many legends never get another chapter written while they are still alive to sing it. Smokey Robinson. Smokey Robinson was born in Detroit in 1940 and stepped into American music early enough to help build Motown before the label became a monument. With the Miracles, he gave the company some of its first essential hits, then kept writing songs that spread far beyond his own group. Titles like Shop Around the Tracks of My Tears, You've Really Got a Hold on Me, and Tears of a Clown put his voice at the center of the sound, while his songwriting reached into the catalogs of other Motown giants through songs such as My Girl for the Temptations and My Guy for Mary Wells. Britannica still describes the Miracles as one of the groups that helped define Motown in the 1960s, and Motown's own history names Robinson as one of the label's major writers and producers. He did not stop when the first chapter ended. After leaving the Miracles as a full-time member in 1972, he moved into a solo career and kept adding records that carried his name into another era, including Cruisin' Being With You and Just to See Her. The official Smokey Robinson site still presents him not only as a legend from the Motown years, but as a working artist with current concerts, current news, and an active release history. His official Instagram also promotes the 2025 album, What the World Needs Now, which means the catalog is still growing while he is here to stand beside it. How many men who helped invent one era of black music are still alive long enough to keep adding new pages to it? He is still moving now, not only through old honors and old records, but through live dates people can still buy tickets for. His official concerts page lists upcoming shows, and other current listings show performances continuing into 2026, including dates in Illinois, Connecticut, California, and summer appearances such as a Hollywood Bowl bill with Gladys Knight. Smokey Robinson is not sitting outside the story looking back at what once happened. He is still walking into theaters with the same name that helped write the language of Motown in the first place. Brenda Holloway. Brenda Holloway was born in California in 1946 and entered Motown young enough to feel like part discovery, part gamble, part promise. Berry Gordy signed her as the label's first West Coast female artist, and once Every Little Bit Hurts hit in 1964, the promise stopped looking theoretical. The record climbed into the Billboard Hot 100, put her on the Motortown Review, and gave Motown a singer whose voice could carry restraint and heartbreak in the same breath. Then came When I'm Gone, Then You've Made Me So Very Happy, the song she co-wrote with her sister Patrice before it later became an even bigger crossover standard for Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Brenda was still barely out of girlhood while helping write the emotional vocabulary of a label that usually gets remembered through other names first. Her years at Motown did not end with a neat fade. In 1968, she walked away in the middle of a session disillusioned with the business around her and uneasy with where that life was pulling her. She later sued over money tied to the success of You've Made Me So Very Happy and won. After that came a quieter, more uneven path, later recording stretches away from the center gospel work Northern Soul Rediscovery in Britain, and a return to performing after Mary Wells died in 1992. In 1999, the Rhythm and Blues Foundation gave her a Pioneer Award, and in 2011 she recorded a duet with Cliff Richard for Solicious. How many living voices from that Motown era can still say they were there when the sound was still being invented, not archived? Brenda Holloway is still alive today, and even though her public activity has been far quieter in recent years than it was during her comeback decades, her name remains on Motown's own artist pages and in the living roll call of singers who never needed a giant catalog to leave a permanent wound in the music. Some careers burn hotter. Hers still lingers. Ruby Andrews. Ruby Andrews was born in Mississippi in 1947, moved to Chicago as a child, and came up in the city that taught soul music how to sound streetwise without losing its heartbreak. She started out with a vocal group called the Vondells, then moved into solo records, and by 1967, Casanova Your Playing Days Are Over had carried her onto the national R&B chart. The song reached number 9 on the Billboard R&B chart, crossed into the pop chart, and gave her the kind of title people still attach to her name first. She kept going after that with records such as You Made a Believer Out of Me and Everybody Saw You songs that kept her rooted in late 1960s and early 1970s. Chicago soul, even as the business kept shifting around her. The path after the chart years did not close up neatly. She recorded for labels including Kelmac, Zodiac, MCA, and ABC, later cut blues-oriented material, and kept a catalog that outlived the short window when radio gave her the most room. The discography attached to her name stretches from Everybody Saw You in 1970 through later releases, like Black Ruby, Genuine Ruby Kiss, This Ruby, and Hip Shakin' Mama. That kind of career is easy to flatten if someone only remembers one hit, but the records say otherwise. She stayed in motion long enough to leave more than one doorway into her work. How many singers from that era are still here while the songs that first carried their names are still waiting for new listeners to stumble into them? Ruby Andrews is still alive today and publicly available. Biographical sources still list her as active from 1966 to the present. The trail around her current day is quieter than it is for some of the bigger household names in this countdown, but that silence does not erase the place she holds. She is one of those living voices from the deep soul era whose story survives in the records first, then in the name, then in the realization that the woman behind Casanova is still part of the living roll call of Black R&B history. Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder was born in Saginaw, Michigan in 1950 and was still a child when Motown signed him, first presenting him to the world as Little Stevie Wonder. By the early 1960s, he was already charting, already playing multiple instruments, already moving with the kind of instinct that made grown musicians look twice. Then the catalog started stacking up: Fingertips, Superstition, Higher Ground, Living for the City. Sir Duke, Isn't She Lovely, and as all coming from the same mind that was also building landmark albums like Talking Book Intervisions, Fulfillingness, First Finale, and Songs in the Key of Life. Britannica still describes him as one of the most creative musical figures of the late 20th century, which feels almost too small once you remember how much of modern R&B, soul pop, and black musical ambition still carries his fingerprints. He never turned into a name people only visit through old records. In August 2024, he released Can We Fix Our Nation's Broken Heart? His first new song in 4 years, and in 2025, Reuters captured him performing at the Grammy Awards, while other reporting documented him on stage again at the 2025 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony. The official site remains active, still carrying his catalog biography and current presence under his own name, rather than sealing him inside a tribute era. How many artists get to spend a lifetime shaping the language of black music and still walk into the next year with new songs, new stages, and a public that treats them like unfinished history? He is still here now, and the story is still moving. In 2025, he headlined Lytham Festival in England, adding another large live appearance to a career that has already stretched across more than 6 decades. The remarkable part is not only the length of the run, but the fact that the run never fully settled into past tense. Stevie Wonder remains one of those names that still sounds present even before you check the date. They are still here, still breathing, still carrying the voices that helped build black music into what the world knows today. Some remained in the spotlight, some were pushed to the edges, some were remembered only by those who never stopped listening. But every one of them proved that lasting power means more than chart positions or radio trends. Which living legend on this list do you believe deserves far more love, respect, and recognition right now? Leave your answer in the comments and follow and subscribe to Black Legends Revealed for more stories that keep these icons alive where they belong.